So good evening, everyone, and welcome to Salve Regina University's Office of Admissions presentation on shortening your college list, or as I like to call it, finding your ideal you. My name is Jim Fowler, and I am the Vice President for Enrollment Management here at Salve. Which means that I oversee the offices of admissions and financial aid. A little bit about myself so you know who this guy is. One, if you're a parent in the room, you'll get the joke that I am not the Mutual of Omaha guy. And if you don't understand the joke, Google Jim Fowler, Mutual of Omaha guy. You'll figure it out. But I am not that guy. I am Jim Fowler, Vice President for Enrollment Management at Salve Regina University. I did my undergraduate and graduate degrees at Binghamton University in upstate New York, majoring in English and theater, and have a master's degree in higher education. And I've spent almost 30 years working at a variety of colleges and universities of many different types, big and small, public, private, from some of the most selective colleges and universities in the country to some open enrollment institutions and everything in between. So I've been very fortunate in my career to see all facets of higher education, and hopefully I will be able to bring that experience to this presentation as we talk a little bit about how you can launch into your college search process and begin to narrow down your list of schools that you will both explore over the next year and then ultimately apply to, hopefully be admitted to, and then have some choices if you are high school juniors about a year from now, if you are younger than juniors, maybe a couple years, 2 or 3 years. And so I encourage you throughout the presentation, if you do have some questions, feel free to use the chat box to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to clarify anything that I've been saying. And we'll leave some time for some question and answer at the end as well. But let's start with what I'm talking about when I say ideal you, and why do I say ideal you? Well, really, the idea is to create a list of colleges and universities that best reflect an institution that is going to serve your personality and ultimately your goals. And it requires a lot of self-reflection. Finding your ideal you does not happen by accident. It does not necessarily happen by just looking at schools that you've already heard of or that people in your orbit have recommended to you. And it's, it's the place where you are most likely to achieve your academic and personal potential. And I think what's important about understanding that is understanding that you may not even know what this school is yet. You may not have heard the name of this school yet. There are many colleges and universities out there, and part of doing this search process and this self-reflection is looking beyond what you may know to be quote unquote good schools. And in order to illustrate this point, if we were in an auditorium somewhere at your high school or some other place, I would do an exercise with you that I affectionately call the Pepsi Challenge, and ask your parents about what the Pepsi Challenge was. It was a big ad campaign back in the 80s as Pepsi was trying to establish dominance in the soft drink market. But I took that and I took an interesting little twist on it as it relates to the college search process. And what I would ask you to do is to imagine that you were on the beach somewhere and it's like 90 degrees, really, really hot day, and you're really, really thirsty, and you've got a cooler, and you open up the cooler and there's a whole assortment of sodas in there for you to choose from. What would you choose? And typically I would ask people in the audience, if you would choose a Coke, go ahead and sit down. And if you would choose a Pepsi, go ahead and sit down. And then everybody that was left standing, which would be a pretty large group of people, because not everybody would choose Coke or Pepsi. A lot of people would choose something else. I would use this to illustrate the point that if you think about Coca-Cola as the flagship state universities that everybody thinks of. If you're here in the Northeast, it's UConn Stores, it's UMass Amherst, it's University of Michigan, it's University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, the big public institutions. Those are the Cokes of the world. And if you think about Pepsi as sort of the top 50 to 100 colleges and universities on US News and World Report, the private schools that everybody knows the name of. Those two representations of schools, the Coke and the Pepsi, only represent a small percentage of all the colleges and universities in the country. Most students go someplace else. Most students do not go to the state flagship universities or those top US News schools. They go to a lot of different colleges and universities, and all of them get very, very good educations because there are more than 4,000 accredited colleges and universities in the US to choose from. And so the goal in all of this is to find a group of schools within those 4,000 that aren't necessarily the schools that you know because your parents went there or your friends go there, or you did a camp there, or you saw them on ESPN, or they're highly ranked by somebody. But the ideal you is really a school that's going to be the best reflection of you and your needs. And so how do you get to that point? How do you find a set of institutions that maybe you haven't heard of, or maybe you have, that best reflect you? And the way you do it is by what I would term taking a personal inventory, thinking about, what do you want? If you could build a college or university from scratch, call it Gracie University or Elsie University or Hillary University, just throwing some names out that I see here in the participant list, then what would it look like? How would it be structured? What would the academic program look like? How big would it be? Where would it be located? What would the campus culture be like? How would you spend your time there? These are the ways that you can, in your head, build your ideal you, and then use that as a platform for identifying colleges and universities that are ultimately a really, really good match for you. So let's start with academic interests, because ultimately, hopefully you're going to college to learn, and you're going to college to pursue an academic area of study, both broadly in terms of whatever core curriculum or general education curriculum the school provides, but also in terms of what ultimately you think you might want to major in or minor in, what you might want to concentrate in. You may be thinking about double majoring or double majoring in a minor. Some schools make that very easy. Other schools, not so much. You have to really focus on one area of study. How is the institution organized? Colleges and universities, depending on their size and depending on their offerings, are organized in different ways. At some places, like my institution, Salve Regina University, all academic programs are under one umbrella. You're part of the university community, and everybody is under one, what we call an academic provost. So there's not these sort of separate academic bureaucratic structures. At other colleges and universities, like my alma mater, there are individual academic schools. So there's a school of business, and there's a school of nursing, and there's a school of education, and there's a school of engineering, and a school of liberal arts and sciences. So that might influence what you're looking for in a college, how an institution is structured. If you're thinking about programs that require you to directly enter as a freshman and start immediately so that you can get through your whole curriculum. In a lot of cases, these are nursing programs. If you're interested in nursing, a bachelor's of nursing program at many institutions now, you've got to come in as a freshman or else you're kind of out of luck. At some places, it's the School of Business. At some places, it's the School of Engineering or other very specific programs. How sure are you of what you want to study? If you're undecided, you probably want to go someplace where there's a lot of flexibility to move around between different academic areas so you can explore and ultimately find what suits you. If you think you might want to major in political science and go into law school, which is how I entered college, but you're not 100% sure, you may want to go someplace that provides you with some flexibility to adjust what you're doing. Similarly, or conversely, I should say, if you are exclusively focused on one thing and you might want to go someplace that really does that exclusively. So if you think about music conservatories or schools of art or schools of dance or theater, sometimes for the people interested in the performing arts, they want to go someplace that's really, really intense. It's basically that stuff all the time. But you have to really reflect on what it is you are looking for and what you need. Does the institution offer you an opportunity as an undergraduate to do research? Some people really want to do undergraduate research. Other people could care less. But if research is something that you want to do, you're going to want to have to ask important questions about what research opportunities are available to you for undergraduate study. And then, of course, many students want places that will allow you to study abroad or study away. And depending on the format that you want that to take, that might be also part of your academic interest. So add that stuff first and foremost to your inventory of your ideal you. What academically does the school that you're interested in looks like? The next issue that is a pretty normal one to talk about in this college search process is size. Everybody wants something a little bit different in terms of size. Some people want someplace small where everybody's going to know their name, where faculty are going to know you, where you're going to have small class sizes and a lot of interaction with faculty and other students, and you really can't hide anywhere, where you go to class and the faculty member knows if you're there or knows if you're not there, and is really keeping tabs on you and is probably pretty actively engaged in your learning. Other people want really, really large places and have no problem with going into a big lecture hall setting, and in some cases just being anonymous for a lot of their undergraduate experience. So, and there's everything in between in terms of size, and your personality will dictate and your learning style also will dictate what really works best for you. There's also different types related to these sizes. So obviously there's public institutions and private institutions. Public institutions receive some level of funding from the state in which they're located in. Oftentimes the campuses are what are called land grant, which means that the state owns the campus and is funding the structures on the campus. Private institutions are what it means, private. They're privately funded, they're privately endowed, and operate a little bit differently than public institutions. Some institutions like Salve Regina University are religiously affiliated. In the case of Salve, we're sponsored by a religious order called the Sisters of Mercy, but other places are very overt in how religiously affiliated there are. Some places are religiously affiliated, but it's not really obvious when you go on campus. Some institutions are two-year institutions where you would only earn an associate degree. Other institutions are four-year institutions where you would earn a bachelor's degree. And some students like to start at a two-year and then transfer to a four-year. Examples of two-year institutions that most people are aware of are community colleges. And then there's what's called Carnegie classification. And Carnegie classification identifies for you usually how big an institution is, but also its commitment to research and its commitment to offering not just undergraduate programs, but graduate programs. So Salve Regina University, as an example, we are a master's Carnegie classification, which means we offer undergraduate programs and master's programs. We also offer a couple PhDs, but primarily master's at the graduate level. Other places that are you might think of as an R1 institution would be someplace where it's very, very large, very heavy research, very heavy graduate focused, and a place like University of Michigan is a classic example of an R1 institution. Then, of course, there's location. And location can be a lot of different factors. Location, you're looking at, do you want a campus that's rural, that's really set apart from everybody else, and sort of its own enclave? Do you want someplace that's in a suburban community, or do you want an urban campus? Do you want to basically go to school in the city and the city is your campus in some ways? You also want to think about distance from home. Some people want someplace close to home where they can get home on the weekend or even get home on a moment's notice. Other people want to go as far away from home as possible. They want an adventure. I often joke about my college experience that I wanted someplace close enough to home that I could get there for special events, but far enough away that my parents really had to make a plan to come and see me. So there was no surprise visits for me when I went to college. That was important. So for you, it will depend on what type of distance you want to be from home. As you're looking at your location, also think about how the school interacts with the community. Some places, the campus is your community and your entire life. Other places, the interaction between the campus and the community is an important facet of the overall educational experience, not just the social experience, but also in how you engage with internships and other experiential learning opportunities or service opportunities. So where you're located, what the city and town is like, and what type of interaction takes place between the campus and the larger community may also inform your locational preferences as you consider your ideal you. Then there's campus culture. Everybody is an individual in this process. And so you have to think about who you are and what type of environment you want to study in, not just educationally, not just size-wise, not just in terms of location, but also in terms of the other people you're going to be studying around and the just general environment of the campus. One thing that often comes up is how friendly is the place? Do you walk on campus and feel like people are really engaging you, or people are sort of keep to themselves? And depending on the type of personality you are, one or the other is going to be attractive to you. Diversity of campus is very, very on a lot of people's minds, and depending on who you are as a person, that might be something that's extremely important to you. That for others, that might be something that's a secondary consideration. Is it a place where students are on campus all the time and don't really go home, or is it a place where everybody kind of goes home regularly? And depending on your personality, that will impact. What's the emphasis on sports or arts in the community? What's the level of academic engagement? Is academics something that's a focus primarily when you go to class and in the classroom and that's it? Or is academics something that is incorporated in all aspects of the campus life? And even when you're in the residence hall, people are debating books that you're reading in class and philosophy. That's part of the academic engagement. Think about the traditions of the campus. Every campus has its own traditions, and those traditions relate to you and are something that are attracted to you. Some of you are looking for schools with Greek life, and some schools have Greek life and some schools don't. So ask that question if that's something that's important to you. One of the things that I think people often forget about the college experience that's very different than high school. In high school, you live a very structured existence. When you're in school, you're, for the most part, going to class. Every day is packed with classes. And then when you leave school, classes are over and you're off to do something else. College is a little bit different. You're not necessarily going to class every day. You're certainly usually not going to class for a full day. Because usually you're going to spend about 15 hours a week in class. Most class course structures are 5 courses at 3 credits. That's 15 credits. That's 15 hours a week in class. What ends up happening when you think about it is over the course of a week, there are 168 hours. And if you're hopefully sleeping 8 hours a night, and mom and dad will appreciate hearing that you're sleeping 8 hours a night, you will sleep for 56 hours in a week. You'll be in class for 15 hours. That leaves 97 hours in the week for you to fill with activity. What are you going to fill it with? Are you just going to sit in your room and play video games, or are you going to be an active participant in the campus community? And if that you're going to be an active member of the campus community, what activities do you want to be involved in? Are there things that you want to try that you've never tried before? Are there things that you do now that you want to make sure that you continue with? And can you do everything that you want? I can tell you, when I did my college search, that was a big part of my decision-making process. I wanted to go someplace that would allow me to try everything. And when I looked at schools, some schools said, absolutely, whatever you want to do, you can try it, you can do it. You want to play sports, you want to be student government, you want to be involved in clubs and activities, you want to do the arts, you can do whatever you want. Other places that I went to and looked at said, you know what, here people really focus on one or two things. And so there's not a lot of exploration that happens. You just sort of commit to the big things, and that's where you go. So decide which you want in terms of how you're going to spend that free time. Of course, other considerations in this process include selectivity, will you get in, and cost. But it's usually not that simple when you just think of selectivity or cost, because a lot of people have preconceptions about what these two things mean. And ultimately, what you're going to find throughout this process is they don't necessarily mean what you think they mean. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Selectivity is an indicator that is reflective usually of the number of applicants an institution receives versus the number of spaces they have to offer. And selectivity does not necessarily equate to quality. I think that's a misunderstanding of colleges. Selectivity really is often more equated to college popularity. So name institutions tend to get more applications, therefore are admitting fewer students to fill their class. Schools that maybe run under the radar might get fewer applications and admit more students to fill their class, and therefore are less quote unquote selective, but may be just as strong of quality as the school that's the well-known name. But selectivity does factor in as you're thinking about building your list of schools. So it's important that you are honest about what you look like academically and what you bring to the table. Your grades, your rigor of courses, the courses that you're taking, are you taking standard level courses, honors courses, AP courses, and in some cases test scores, though more and more institutions are moving test optional. And what's important to think about in terms of your academic profile is that your school GPA does not necessarily reflect the GPA that the admissions office is considering. Most admissions offices, while we want to see that you've done well in your non-academic courses, whether arts or gym class or other things that are happening, the primary concern in the admissions process is how you're doing in your main academic subjects, your math, your social science or history, your English or writing classes, and your science classes. And so many institutions will do what's called a recalculation of your GPA based on your academic core courses. So you've got to be very honest about how you're doing in those courses when you consider your GPA as it relates to the selectivity of an institution. And these are all things that you should ask as you're researching your institutions of your admissions counselor and other people on the campus. So I put up this profile here to give you a little illustration of what I was talking about. We've got Joe student here, just typical good old-fashioned average guy coming out of high school. He's got an 1100 SAT, which equates to about a 22 ACT. He's got a B average in college prep courses. And he looks at 3 different schools. School A has an SAT middle 50% range, which means the middle 50% of students who are admitted have between a 1080 and a 1340, or a 23 and a 31 on the ACT. Most students accepted have a B average in college prep courses, and they admit 83% of their applicant pool. School B is a little bit more selective in terms of their accept rate. They only accept 5% of their applicants. They have an average SAT of their admits of between 1460 and 1570, and the students that are admitted all have A averages and have taken basically exclusively AP courses. And then School C has a 62% admit rate, and the SAT is between 1080, 1380, and a B plus A minus average in honors and AP courses in the case of School C. So in the case of Joe Student, his chances of getting admitted at School A are pretty high, almost certain. His chances of getting admitted at School C are pretty good. He's pretty sure to get in there, but there's an outside possibility that he won't. And then if Joe Student applies to School B, his chances of admission are probably about 1 in 1,000, and increase slightly if he brings some special talent to the table that the school is looking for. Now, in terms of the quality of these institutions, if you knew what School A, School B, and School C was, School A is a large public institution that has an exceptional engineering program and is a really, really well-known name. And if I would say it to you, you'd say, wow, that's a great school. I can't believe they admit 83% of their students, but they do. School B, not surprisingly, is an Ivy League school, and these are last year's stats, so I think they're down to a 3% admit rate, if that doesn't scare you. And then School C is a really, really well-known liberal arts school that, again, if you heard the name of, you'd be like, that's a great school. I'm happy to hear that 62% of students are admitted to that school. So any of these schools would be an excellent choice for you to go to college, but their selectivity varies based on their size and based on how many people apply to them. School A is in the Midwest, and Midwestern schools tend to get fewer applications than they need to fill their class, hence the 83% acceptance rate. Same thing for School C. School C is located in Pennsylvania. They don't get quite as many applications as School B, which is located in the Northeast. So that's all things to consider in this selectivity process, because ultimately admit rate is a mathematical concept. It doesn't necessarily equate to quality. Also, as you enter this process, it is not unusual for people to be very, very concerned about selectivity, and that if they don't get into the most selective college, that somehow they have failed. And I want to disabuse yourself of this belief. The college admissions process is not about success or failure. It is about ultimately it ending up someplace where you're going to be happy and successful. And I think it's important for you to know going in that only about 8% of colleges in the US admit less than 50% of their students. So if you live in the Northeast, we have this belief that all colleges and universities are inaccessible and that they only admit a small percentage of their applicant pool. Not true. 8% of colleges admit less than 50% of their applicant pool, and only about 11% of college students attend these colleges. So 90% of students attend more selective institutions. 16% of institutions are selective, which means they admit between 50 and 75% of their applicant pool. Salve would fall into this category. 10% are moderately selective, 75 to 90%, and 66% are what we would call broad access, which means they accept almost everyone. Between 9 and 10 of 10 people that apply are ultimately admitted. So don't go into this process thinking you're not going to get in. You will get into college. You will have a good place to go. Don't go into this with doom and gloom and stress. It's all going to be okay. So the other piece of this is, for a lot of people, is cost. And you hear a lot of talk about the cost of higher education and how expensive it is going to be. And one of the things that people believe, one of the myths, is that public education is the most affordable route and private is the most expensive route. And what you have to understand about colleges is that colleges and universities is a lot like buying a car. If you talk to your parents about buying a car, especially if you go to a dealership, what you'll learn about car buying is that in almost all cases, you never pay the sticker price. There's always some form of discount. There's always something that happens that decreases the cost, whether it's financial need, whether it's merit, or whether it's just the institution's desire to enroll you. And what this means is that not all schools are unaffordable. Also, what this means is that public schools are not always the most affordable option. Sometimes the private school is more affordable because they might give you more aid than the public school and bring the cost of attendance down significantly. I worked with a friend of mine a couple of years ago whose son was applying to Salve Regina University, and in the process of doing the college search process, her son had been admitted to her state flagship institution and Salve. And in the process, she came up to me and she said, I was really, really surprised that Salve ended up being the less expensive option because he was a good student, had done really well, got a lot of merit aid, they had financial need, and it was less expensive for him to go to Salve, a private institution, than to go to this public institution. Now, the other piece of this, however, is there's also a belief that there's a lot of people going to college and getting a quote unquote free ride. And that's not true. Only about 1.5% of all bachelor's degree students receive a free ride. About 2.5% receive 90% of their cost of attendance. Another 6% receive 75% of the cost of attendance, and only 18 and 19% receive 50% of the cost of attendance. Everybody else is paying above 50%. So you may be going into this thinking, I'm going to get a free ride to college. Forget about that now. Your chances of that are relatively low. So it's important that you make very important financial decisions, and that if you're working this summer, put some money away to help pay for college, because you will probably have to pay something. The other myth about cost of college, particularly related to student athletes, is a lot of student athletes think that they're, one, going to get recruited, and two, that when they get recruited, they're going to get a full athletic scholarships. Only 2% of high school athletes ultimately receive an athletic scholarship, and most of those athletic scholarships are under $11,000 a year. So again, the myth that student athletes get full rides to college, it only happens in a very, very, very minuscule percentage of cases. So don't rely on that either. Almost all schools, however, the cost of educating a student exceeds what you are charged. And so that is why, yes, you'll get some aid in this process, but there is a cost to attendance. And so you have to weigh all of this very carefully in the process. 70% of college students are going to take some student loans to do this. And it's important that every student complete the free application for student aid, or FAFSA, because a little unknown fact about the FAFSA that a lot of people don't realize is that even if you think you don't have need, just filling out the FAFSA and submitting it at most schools is going to get you something. So most people are not going to turn down free money. So it's in your best interest to fill out and submit the FAFSA. So we've talked about creating this personal inventory. What do you do next? Well, you've created your ideal you. You have this picture in your head of the type of school that you want to go to. So you need to do your research. And in terms of doing your research, there's a lot of ways that you can do this. You can utilize search engines. You can go to college fairs and high school visits. You can go to the individual college websites. You can take virtual tours. Almost everybody has great virtual tours now. Wasn't true 10 years ago, certainly true post-pandemic. And there's a lot of great sources out there. I particularly like Princeton Review. I really like the FISC Guide to Colleges. I think Niche has been been a good search yesterday. Obviously, the College Board search feature, Big Future is a good place to go. CapEx, if you haven't discovered that, is a good place to research colleges. But it's important that you don't just use one source. There's a lot of different sources out here that weigh all the information they give you differently. So use multiple sources in doing your research on colleges, and you'll get a much more informed result. Just like when you're doing a research paper, you wouldn't just use one source. Same thing is true in researching colleges. And here is where I make a note about rankings. Rankings are one of the things that I think screw up the college search process for a lot of people, because they think that if they don't go to a school that's highly ranked by a certain ranking agency, then somehow they're going to a less good school. And you have to remember that every ranking system uses its own methodology. And that methodology is created by the creator of the ranking. And so therefore, that methodology is inherently biased, because the person that created that methodology had a picture in their head of what they thought was a good school, and they used that to create the ranking system. That does not necessarily mean that schools that are highly ranked are better, or that schools that are lower ranked are worse, because rankings may or may not reflect the quality of education. They may reflect other factors that you don't even recognize as being important in the process. One of the things that comes up a lot is alumni giving rates, or the percentage of alumni that are working in high income fields. Well, if you want to be a teacher, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to a great school by going to the school that's highly ranked based on that metric. And ultimately, rankings don't know about you. They don't know what's important to you. They don't know what you're looking for your educational experience. So rankings are a resource and a good thing to review and look at, but don't make your decision in the college search process based on rankings, or you will be disappointed. So in making your list, ultimately at this stage in the game as high school juniors, I recommend narrowing down to about 20 schools to do your research on. You've created your ideal you go into search engines, you enter all of the information, you get out some lists, you try to find about 20 schools that you want to do additional research on. And as you're starting to do that research on those individual schools, if you can't imagine yourself there, remove it from the list. Like I said, there's 4,000 colleges out there. There's no reason to have something on your list that you can't envision yourself going to and having a good experience just because somebody told you it's a good school. This process is about you. It's not about your parents. It's not about your grandparents. It's not about your neighbor. It's not about your teachers. It's about you and where you're going to end up and where you're going to study. In this process, though, you also do need to think about beginning to create a list of schools that are a range of selectivity. So if you've reflected on who you are and your academic profile, you want to think about schools that, per what we talked about before with the exercise, looking at the different profiles of institutions that you either are assured to get into, which are safety schools, the schools that you're pretty sure you're going to get into, the accessible schools. And there's nothing wrong with having some schools that you're looking at that you might have that 1 in 1,000 chance of getting into. You may be that 1 in 1,000. Talk to your school counselor. Your school counselors do this. They know the schools, they know you, and they can help you. Trust their opinions. So after you've created this initial list of about 20, start asking for information from colleges. We as colleges and universities want to tell you about ourselves, and we do a lot of work to inform you about who we are and what we offer. It can be a little bit overwhelming. If you have friends who are in the college search process, or brothers or sisters, I'm sure they've told you that they get a lot of email. One suggestion: create an email account specifically for your college search and use that to request information. That way, you know you have one repository for all this information, and you don't have to feel like you're being overwhelmed by it every day if you only want to check it every couple of days. But do check it regularly, because you're going to get information about open house programs and scholarship programs and other things that might have some time constraints to them that you want to know about. ultimately, this information will help you narrow your scopes. And one thing I will also say about asking for information from schools, dirty little secret of the college admissions world, is something called demonstrated interest matters. So every time you interact with a school, that is tracked. And that information, depending on the selectivity of a school, can be used in determining whether or not you're going to be admitted, particularly at more selective institutions. So if you apply to a really, really selective school and you've never reached out to them, you've never talked to them, you've never demonstrated any level of interest, they may look at your application and say, you know what, we only have so many spots for admission. This student doesn't seem really interested. They're out. And so it's good for you to engage with us as schools so that we know that you're engaging. Stealth tours are great, where you just show up on campus and walk around, but we don't know you were there. And going to campus is one of the biggest things to demonstrate interest. So even if you come to campus and just walk around a day that nobody's there and don't take the official tour, email the counselor and say, hey, I was on your campus the other day, had a great tour, just wanted to let you know. So create a file or box for also the stuff you get in the mail. You'll get a lot of mail. If you don't get mail now, you'll enjoy getting stuff in the mail, but it's really useful if you have a separate box for each school so you can keep everything sort of organized. Organization in this process is key. So as I mentioned, demonstrating interest is important. And so visiting campus is really important, both for demonstrating interest, but also for getting a feel for what the school is like. Institutions look one way in brochures and books, and they look something completely different once you're on campus. You can't feel a campus until you're really there. Even virtual tours and 360 tours only give you a sense. There is an inherent human ability to discern whether or not you belong in a place by being there. So by all means, do drop-ins, do scheduled campus tours. If interviews are offered, take advantage of them, even if they're not required, because they're a great way for us to know you and for you to know us and for you to ask specific questions. Open houses are a great way to start this process. Go to a big program where there's going to be all the faculty there and lots of students there and coaches, and you can get into everything. Get to know your admissions counselor. Most schools have an assigned admissions counselor that is dedicated to where you go to high school. And getting to know that person is important because they probably will be at least the first reader on your application. So if you can create a relationship with that person, they'll remember you. They also become a great resource to go to for questions. One of the things about people that work in our field, college admissions, is a lot of people like to think that we're gatekeepers, that our job is to say, you're denied. Nothing could be further from the truth. We hate to deny. We want to admit you. And if you know us and we get to know you, it's much harder for us to want to deny you and much easier for us to want to admit you. So by all means, reach out to your admissions people and develop that relationship, communicate. And remember, each engagement is tracked, so it's in your best interest to do that. So after you've done your research, you should do this between now and sort of the end of the summer, August. You're going to decide where to apply. In this process, you're going to knock schools off your list. You're going to go visit a school and you're going to say, you know what, something here just didn't click. It's not for me. It's out. This school didn't offer exactly what I wanted. I thought it did, but as I researched the program a little bit more, not what I needed. It's out. I really thought I wanted this big school, but turns out after going there, I really want something smaller. So the bigger school is out. Narrow that list to around 10 schools. I used to say 6. Once upon a time, it's about 20 years ago, when I would do this presentation, I'd say narrow to 6 schools. Nowadays, everybody wants a few more options, both in terms of finance, but also in terms of just general concern about the college admissions process, which is unfounded, but people have it anyway. So now I say, have about 10 schools that you're going to apply to. And again, think, can you imagine yourself there? Can you imagine yourself being happy there? Make sure at least one is a school that you're practically guaranteed admission to, and your school counselor can help you discern this. Have one school that you know you can afford. and that your family is willing to pay for. These are two different things. You may be able to afford it, but you might not be willing to pay for it. And so have a school that financially is something that your family agrees on. If you get into this school and if all other options are off the table, we can pay for this. And certainly have a school or two that, again, are that shoot for the moon, 1 in 1,000 chance, because again, you just may get in. Understand your different application processes. There's something called early action and early decision. These are two separate processes. Early decision is what's called a binding program. And what it means is when you apply to that institution, you make a contract with that institution that if they admit you, you're going to go there and you're going to withdraw your applications from other schools. Don't go early decision unless you know you can afford it, because you're also locked into a place that you don't know how much aid you're going to get. You want to make sure that if you're applying someplace early decision, it's both the place you want to go 150% and it's a place that you 150% can afford. Early action allows you to get an earlier response from a college or university without that sort of binding contract. And so early action and early decision deadlines usually are sometime in either late September, early October, or early November. And so you want to sort of get all your ducks in a row if you're going to apply early. And then regular decision deadlines usually are sometime after the first of the year, January, February. And that's usually utilized if you're still looking or you just didn't get your act together to get all your applications in. But it's in your best interest to apply to as many schools earlier in the process as possible so you can get your decisions back and have more time to make a decision. Most schools accept what's called the common application, which allows you to enter all the information that you need for an application and submit to a lot of schools all at once. If a school doesn't offer the common application, make sure you make note of that, because that's going to be a little bit extra work on your part to get that submitted. Start working now on your personal statement. Summer is a great time to be thinking about what you want to write about yourself and how you want to write it about yourself. Most important part of your personal statement, make sure it's written well, punctuated correctly, and uses correct grammar. You are applying to college. It's important that you write appropriately. And feel free to be creative, but don't be creative outside of yourself. Be yourself. I'm not funny, if you haven't figured out already. I'm not a funny person, so I would never try to be funny in a college essay. If you're a really funny person and everybody says you're hilarious, by all means be funny in your college essay. But ultimately be authentic to yourself. We want to know who you are. Also, don't be modest. In your college application, you're going to also provide all the things you've done in high school that you've been active in. If you're a swimmer, don't just put on your college application, I swim. I swim too. Tell me your times. Tell me how fast you swim in an event, because those are important things and maybe something that a school wants to know about. So be honest about yourself, be authentic, and let us know who you are, because ultimately we are selecting you as an individual, not you as a collection of numbers and grades. So hopefully, if you do this process well, you've got a group of, say, 10 schools to apply to. Don't go into this thinking you're going to get into every single school. That is not the goal. The goal is to get enough acceptances so you have some choices. So if you apply to 10 schools and you get 6 acceptances, that means you've got 6 good options to look at. Chances are you're going to get into more to 6 if you do this process well. If you only have a couple reach schools, you probably should get into 7 or 8, maybe 9 if you're lucky. And you're going to want to go back and visit schools again before making a final decision. Why? Because believe it or not, you're going to change a lot as a person between now and a year from now. That transition from junior year to senior year to first year of college is a huge transitional period in all of our lives. And so what you think you want in a college now may be completely different a year from now after you go through this process and you learn more about the college search process and what colleges offer. You may think you want to major in one thing now and find out a school has something completely different that you never considered. One of the things that happens a lot when students visit Salve is they learn about our cultural historic preservation program. What's cultural historic preservation? You've probably never heard of it. It's the process of being involved in the historic preservation of buildings and municipalities and historic properties, and is this really great intersection of art history and anthropology and archaeology and studio art and materials management and construction. You know, most people that when they come to Salve, they've never heard of that program. All of a sudden they hear about it like, wow, I never even thought about that before. I was going to major in philosophy. Now I want to major in cultural historic preservation. So, you know, be open to the process of change. And just because you visited a school once and you felt like that was the place a year ago, when you go back again, you may have a different reaction. So it's important that you visit one more time before making that final decision. Highly encourage you to take advantage of what are called class visits, where you can come spend a day on campus with a student, shadow them, go to class, see what it's actually like. Make sure you ask lots and lots of questions when you visit campus, and get off the beaten path. You're going to want to take the tour, and you're going to have a great student ambassador that gives you a tour. But the student ambassador is an employee. And there are people that are specially selected for that role. You're going to want to ask a student on the street what their experience is, so you get the full context of what you're looking at. And try the food. You're going to be living someplace for 4 years. You're going to be sleeping there, and you're going to be eating there every day. You better be sure you like the food. So go in the dining hall and see what there is to offer. So you've done all this, you have to make the final decision. What do? You think about, have your impressions changed? As I said before, what's going to happen between now and a year to a year and a half from now to you, and as you reflect on everything, you're going to have changing opinions, and that's fine. Think about what you've learned about yourself, and were there things that you didn't initially consider? Size. You might have wanted a small school, now you want a big school. You might have wanted a school in a city, now you want a more traditional campus. All these things are going to change throughout this process. Think about some of the connections that you've made. You may connect with a faculty member on a campus and you're like, wow, that person's really exciting. I want to make sure I learn and study with that person. And did the visit really, and the whole experience really live up to the hype? Especially for schools that you quote unquote know. Did you visit the school and go, wow, that's exactly what I expected, or wow, that was nothing I expected at all? Certainly happened to me in my college search process. I can remember very clearly, I was absolutely sure that there was one specific, very selective school that I wanted to go to. And every time I visited the place, I became less enchanted with it, and ultimately ended up to go someplace else, even though I got in and everything on paper said I should go to that school because it was the most selective school I got into. So you're going to want to do a pro and con list at the end of this, which is ultimately going to help you discern what works for you and what doesn't. So you've done all this research, you've taken all this time, you've followed your inventory, you've visited, you've gotten in, you've visited again, you've done your pro and con list, you think you know what you're going to do. At the end of it all, chuck it out the window and follow your gut. Because in 30 years of doing this, I can tell you that when you walk on a college campus and you just know, that's a sign for you. And if you just know, trust that something in you is giving you good information. And so in this college search process, you're gonna get a lot of data, and data is great and really, really important. But ultimately, you want to end up someplace you're going to be happy. Because the greatest key and unknown success to college experience is if you're someplace you're happy, you're going to be successful academically, you're going to be successful socially, and you're going to be very, very successful in life once you leave there. Because every school that you're going to be looking at is a good school in their own way. And ultimately, you will choose the right place if you just trust your instincts and trust yourself, because you've gotten to this point because you've worked hard and you've done the right things. now you're going to be able to take this next great step and go on this new adventure. So if you have any other questions about anything that I haven't been clear on, by all means, put them in the chat. I'm happy to take a couple minutes to answer any additional questions. If you want to email me, you can certainly do that. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at Salve Admit Guy, mostly on Twitter, occasionally on Instagram. I'm still learning the gram. I'm old. It's not my thing. But you can find me on Twitter, and I share a lot of really interesting information, not just about Salve, but the overall college search process. You'll also find musings from me on music and theater and soccer, which are my passions, on Instagram, and occasionally pictures of my kids. So again, any questions, you can reach me at any of these places on the screen, ask any questions here. And if not, thank you so much for joining tonight. I hope you found the information useful. And you take some of this information to heart to inform your college search process. And ultimately, I hope part of why you found out about this program is that you're interested in Salve, and that you'll come and visit us very soon, because why wouldn't you want to come and visit Newport, Rhode Island? It's absolutely amazing, and summer is here, so good time to come and see campus and take a walk on our famous cliff walk, see our remarkable architecture, and learn about one of the great up-and-coming universities in the country. So if there are no other questions, I don't see any other in the box. Thank you very much for joining. Again, hope you found this useful, and have a really wonderful evening. Take care.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.